Good afternoon and Happy New Year. I'm delighted to be with all of you today, despite the very difficult nature of this subject. My bottom line message today is if we continue to criminalize drug addiction, we're not treating it. And the system we have today is part of the problem now, not part of the solution. When our daughter Lori was just 34 years old, my husband Frank and I lost her to the demons of addiction. And for those of you who have lost a child to this terrible disease, you know there is nothing worse than planning your child's funeral. I had known Lori and her sister Tracy. I met Lori when she was 6 years old, and I fell in love with her and her sister Tracy almost before I fell in love with their father, my husband Frank, whom I met 34 years ago. Lori had long blonde hair and sparkling eyes, and as she grew into a beautiful and mature woman, she was smart and full of spunk, and she never lost that sparkle. And so what broke my heart most of all, as I watched our daughter struggle with the demons of addiction, what broke my heart most of all was to watch the look that grew in her once bright eyes as addictions overcame her. There's an old saying, our eyes are the windows to our soul. And as Lori grew progressively sicker, the sparkle, the potential, the possibilities that had once filled her life disappeared from behind her eyes. The light, the sparkle she once had, left her. And what remained was a dull, flat void. It is the look of hopelessness. It is the look that too many of us see, and it is that look that haunts me most when I think of her. Lori had been battling addictions for years. She had multiple addictions, like too many addicts. Eating disorders, alcohol, prescription drugs. She had been in and out of rehab 3 times. And as anyone who has loved someone desperately, who has an addiction, as anyone knows, you can force someone into rehab, but you cannot make the addict well. Only the addict can make themselves well with the right treatment and support and love around them. We learned of Lori's death when 2 police officers came to our home. And virtually every minute of every day, after those 2 police officers stood in our living room and told Frank and I about the death of our daughter, we both have wondered what signs we missed, what we could have done differently to help Lori overcome her demons. It is the torture of second guessing that every parent goes through who has lost a child, that any of us who have lost anyone we loved go through. What did we miss? What could we have done differently? Unfortunately, so many of the men and women that I meet every day on the campaign trail, not just those of you here in this room today, but so many people I meet every single day have experienced tragedies just like ours. You too, and they too, have lost mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and sons and daughters and friends. Drug addiction is an epidemic, and it takes too many of our people every day. This is a battle we must fight, and there are things that we can and must do. But we know that what we have been doing too often isn't working. It's failing. So of course we must invest more in mental health and in the treatment of drug addiction. We shouldn't be criminalizing addiction, because when we criminalize drug abuse, we're not treating drug abuse. In New Hampshire alone, 85% of state prisoners have a substance abuse problem. These men and women need help. We need to reform the criminal justice system and make sure that we're putting the right people in prison. The federal prison population has doubled in the last 20 years, and nearly half of the inmates in federal prison are in there for nonviolent drug offenses. In fact, we now have the highest incarceration rates in the world, and the majority of the people we have in prison are people like my daughter Lori, struggling with addictions. It is, of course, important to keep violent criminals out of our communities, but it is also true that prison is not always the right answer. Drug offenders who get into treatment, rather than go through the normal criminal justice system, are about 25% less likely to get rearrested in the 2 years after leaving the program. It's clear, we have enough data now to know that it's clear there is a better way. And a number of states are on the forefront of this fight and these innovations, developing solutions to a problem that the federal government has failed to solve, and our criminal justice system cannot solve as well. Texas, as but one example, now has specialized drug courts that allow more flexibility in addressing nonviolent offenses. Georgia, as another example, has made it a priority to help inmates earn a degree and gain skills that will help them get a job and stay out of prison. In New Hampshire, I've gotten to see some of these innovations firsthand. Last month, for example, I visited CADDY, Communities for Alcohol and Drug-Free Youth, an organization that I'm sure all of you in this room know well, but so that others can learn about this innovative treatment. CADDY is an organization that has had great success, actually, in offering youth with substance abuse disorders a pathway to recovery that doesn't take them through the normal criminal justice system. Instead, CADDY gets them the help they need. And so we need to empower states like Texas and Georgia and New Hampshire to implement the solutions they know are working. I remember distinctly, I remember the second time Lori came out of rehab and she relapsed once again. I remember standing in front of a judge, begging him not to send her back to prison, knowing that a prison sentence, one more time, would not help Lori overcome her addictions, trying to explain to this judge that our daughter was a good person who just was fighting really hard with a really terrible disease. That judge, I'm sure, had sympathy for my plea, but his hands were also tied based on the laws that he was there to enforce. And so Lori went back to jail. And I know what that experience did for her because I saw her when she came out. At the moment those two police officers delivered the news to Frank and me, we lost both the woman that Lori was and the woman she could have been. All our hope for her and her life died. We grieved for Lori. We grieved for our family. We grieved for ourselves. Unfortunately, I have seen that look, that dull, flat, void look of hopelessness in too many people's eyes. I remember walking down a street in New Hampshire, in Nashua, the summer of this year. And as I walked down the street saying hello to people I met, I was drawn to two young men sitting on a bench. They looked to me like Lori had looked. And so I sat down next to them. It turns out these two young men were struggling with addictions. They had just come out of a Narcotics Anonymous program in this particular case. It was clear they were fighting the good fight every single day. And I told them that their lives mattered. I told them that I knew how hard their fight was. I told them that there were people that cared about them each and every day. And I remember these two men asked to have their picture taken with me. And then they asked me something else. They said, please make sure that there is more resource, more money, more support, more understanding for what we go through each and every day. And it is one of the reasons I am delighted to join you here today to fulfill that promise. People are losing the sense of limitless possibility that has always defined this nation. We know that people who struggle with addiction lose that sense of possibility every single day if there aren't caring communities and effective treatments around them. But too many of our young people don't see this as a nation of limitless possibility anymore, whether or not they struggle with addictions. In too many cities, young people are getting access to drugs and then getting arrested and then turning back to drugs. It is a vicious cycle. We need to create circumstances in which young people have a stake in their community and in their nation. And people only have a stake in their community and in their nation if they believe their communities and their nation offer them possibilities, real possibilities for treatment, for recovery, and for their lives. Actually, it is why I'm running for president, because I think we must once again restore possibilities for every American, regardless of their circumstances, regardless of the terrible demons that they are fighting every day. I believe it is time to restore power to the people, time to restore power and money and resources to programs that we know work, time to take our country back from a system that has failed us and for a federal government that fails us too often as well. Thank you for letting me tell my story. Thank you for what you are doing to help so many young people here in New Hampshire, and by your example, so many people across the nation. And I look forward to the discussion we're about to have with the distinguished panel. Thank you so very much.